if you look at the capitalization of just the New York Stock Exchange alone, forget NASDAQ and all the rest of them, all right? Just New York is more than all the capitalization of Europe combined.
Yeah.
Home Depot, when it did an IPO, was more than the value of all the IPOs of Europe for 10 years.
Wow.
Europe is not a place that you can park money. And because they never consolidated the debt, as a major fund manager, I can pick up the phone and say, buy me 10 billion of US treasuries. All right. I can't do that with Europe.
It's always a pleasure to get a chance to talk to, well, who the Wall Street Journal told me was the most expensive forecaster in the world. I didn't care about that. I cared about the forecasting record, which has been brilliant, of course, known throughout the world. Martin Armstrong joins me. Marty, I'm sure you are just overwhelmed. It seems like things are coming out of left field, right field, center field, the home plate. They just must be bombarding you at this point.
I would say 10 years ago, you would deal with a crisis in one area of the world. Now they're all everywhere. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing. It's like dealing with Romania, and they're setting their election for the 18th. I said, do you realize Poland's also the 18th? Can't you at least make it another day? It's insane everywhere, absolutely everywhere.
But speaking of that, Socrates has identified this very period, though. That's what I find amazing when I hear things like that. Or we hear that on May 15th, the European Union leaders get together and issue an ultimatum. And I'm thinking back, I know it's been several years, you would be able to give me that date, but we talked about it specifically last September. And you're telling me, oh, by the way, I've marked these on my calendar. It's going to be geopolitical stuff going on, throughout May. And then it happens, like literally.
I don't know. I think it just... It just takes a certain amount of time for something to happen. My mother always used to say there was a time and place for everything, and I think she was right. Mm-hmm. The question becomes, I remember when communism fell in 89, and then and with Tiananmen Square, and then Berlin Wall falls, and then said, oh, it was the communication. No. If you look at it, ancient Rome had its revolution. Republic is born in 509, and within also 6 months, Athens is overthrowing its tyrants, and democracy is born. So it's not. The question is how fast does the information get through the population. And I'm about ready to do a report, also inspired by people from Canada with Alberta separation and stuff. And when you actually go through, I've gone through all the different revolutions and separations, etc. What's fascinating is that it takes place with minorities, not majorities. Mm-hmm. The highest it ever got was maybe 40%. And it seems as though the vast majority are the silent majority, and they just go, all right, just go along with the flow. And some of these events have taken place with as little as 5%. But if they're the vocal people and pushing, and everybody else just goes, oh, well, that's interesting. Even the American civil rights, with Martin Luther King and all that, it was only about 3% of the population. So it doesn't necessarily take 60% to do something.
Well, let's keep on that theme for a second about, it's so interrelated. I'm looking at what's going on in the EU. I'm looking at one of the things, again, your model identified is the escalating war tensions, let's call it at this point, war tensions, and what that could mean for the EU. So let's start with, what are you seeing like on that sort of, again, forgive the simplicity, but the war front right now in Europe?
the biggest problem we have there is, Trump had his phone call with Putin. I just actually was on Russian TV yesterday, but I explained that the problem is not between the United States and Russia. It's it's the EU.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to understand that, and mainly the problem is economic. It's Russia has no interest in going in and taking Europe. What did they get? Nothing. They have no energy, no gold. All you're going to get is a bunch of headaches, and the French will maybe walk in. So you're going to pay our pensions now, and that's about it. Why did Japan go into Manchuria? Because they had no resources. They needed oil and etc. So, there has to be some sort of economic incentive. Back in the Khrushchev days, it was more of a economic religion. Communism is going to, bury capitalism. It wasn't about economics. So, today with Europe, the problem is that when they were forming it, as you know, they came to me and I said, look, this is how we create a currency. And Herman Kohl would not, he admitted before he died, he acted like a dictator, and that he didn't allow the German people to vote because he said he would have lost 7-3.
Mm-hmm.
So he took Germany into the euro and without a vote, and insisted that they would be upset about consolidating the debt, would be bailing out Greece or whatever. So he insisted no consolidation. And so, I was told in 98, I said, this is not going to work. And they said they just had to get the euro through to create the, basically the bureaucracy, and they'll worry, they'll deal with the debts later. And here we are, 2025, they still haven't. And that's the problem. It's starting to crack. They promised nothing would take place unless 100% consensus. Hungary says they objects to any money going to Ukraine. And so they want to strip Hungary of any vote. So they still do what they want to do. Reclassifying the money, that they took from Russia, so they don't need an approval. They're doing everything they can just to win. They just had the Romanian elections on the 18th, and again, the consensus over there is that they interfered one more time.
Let me ask about the Russian EU standoff, let's say, or whatever, whatever you want to call it. But I look at that as a potential way of absolutely distracting from Euro problems, especially financial problems.
Mm-hmm.
But it would have huge implications in terms of capital flow. And I know one thing you've been writing about is saying, keep in mind, don't overlook that possibility that if the tensions ramp up, money's going to come into the U.S. again, strengthening the U.S. dollar against the euro. And I think, can you elaborate a little bit there? Because I think that's one of the key takeaways here.
Look, there are so many people that just look at things on the surface and they don't really understand what's going on. They pretend to be these analysts or whatever. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the capitalization of just the New York Stock Exchange alone, forget NASDAQ and all the rest of them, all right? Just New York is more than all the capitalization of Europe combined. Home Depot, when it did an IPO, was more than the value of all the IPOs of Europe for 10 years.
Wow.
Europe is not a place that you can park money. And because they never consolidated the debt, as a major fund manager, I can pick up the phone and say, buy me $10 billion of U.S. Treasuries. All right. I can't do that with Europe. All right, I still have to make the same decision. Do I want Germany? Do I want France? Do I want Italy? You still there's no. You didn't change the situation. You just moved the volatility from the currency market to the bond market. That's all you did.
Mm-hmm.
It's just smoke and mirrors. So the problem with Europe is, if you look back at 2010, when basically you had Greece get into trouble and needed an IMF loan. The traders, they were short, they made a lot of money, and they said, who's next? Oh, Spain, and run over to Spain and France, etc. So this is the problem, because they didn't consolidate the debt. One EU gets in trouble, and it turns into a contagion. And I suggest you can read online Herbert Hoover's memoirs from 1931, when you had all the sovereign defaults of Europe all defaulted then. And he said capital acted like a loose cannon on the deck of a ship in the middle of a torrent.
Mm-hmm.
We're shooting off in every which direction so fast we couldn't form a committee quick enough to figure out where it was going next. That's what he's describing, is what I saw with Greece. And that's what will happen again with just one EU country in trouble.
But again, I would push it seemed to me, if the threat of escalation and war continues, money's not going to wait to leave Europe. And I know you've been advising on some of that money.
Yeah.
So I don't want to force you to give names, but I think that's the phenomena that people have to understand, that you won't need the shot fired before money starts coming back into the US. Again, because of size being the thing you just alluded to, but other opportunity too.
Plus also, yes, we advise a lot of the institutions in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
We told them, they're moving the gold to the United States. Why? All you have to do is look at World War I. When that started, what did they do? They shut down all the stock exchanges, so you couldn't sell anything to get any money out. All right. And you just had Spain issue an edict that you could not take more than $3,000 in cash out of or 3,000 euros out of your account without government permission. Little by little, they're moving in this direction. And the CBDCs, they are planning to cancel the currency in Europe, as they usually do anyhow. And once they do that and they put it into a CBDC, that's 100% control. You can't get any money out. So that's why you're starting to see it move now.
Yeah. I got to come back. Repeat that about Spain, though, in case that flew by somebody, that there's restrictions now on how much you can take out of your account. Your money, yes, but they're restricting what you can do.
Yeah, you can't take more than 3,000 out without permission from the government. And plus, on top of that, you've had Ursula come out and said that they're looking at taking money from private accounts to fund the war. And she called it unused assets. All right. Now, this is what
I got to get you to repeat that again. These things sound so unbelievable until you see them in practice. So to actually had, the EU president stand there and go, we could take 10%, she'll deem what money isn't being used in your account. I mean, my goodness, that's
just excess cash.
Yeah, revolutionary.
Well, yeah, look, you had Trudeau do that to truckers.
Truckers, yeah.
All right, but, freezing it. She's actually said taking the money as unused assets. All right, now, to put this in perspective, that's what really created the German hyperinflation, not printing money.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what happened was they couldn't make the reparation payments, and in December 1922, and you can buy these bonds on eBay, all right, they took 10% of your account, handed you a bond, which they eventually defaulted on anyhow, that once they did that to people, they took the rest of their money and got the hell out of Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So this is why when Hitler came to power in 1933, he made it a law that it was illegal to have an account outside of Germany without government permission. So he's trying to get that money back into the country. All right. That led to Switzerland in 1934, a few months later, created the numbered account to protect the Germans.
Yeah.
All right. And this is what she's talking about again. I mean, we've been warning our clients over there, look, you better have, get something the heck out of there, because once that first bullet is fired, she's shutting everything down. You won't be able to sell stock. You won't be able to do anything. So North Americans, I would not have any investments in Europe whatsoever at this stage.
Yeah.
It's too risky.
It's just a reminder of why we should be, my question always is, why should we pay attention? This is a reminder why you have to pay attention to this stuff. But it seems to me, something you written earlier, it's already happening with gold. You're seeing gold moving in the same way. I mean, capital flows and goes to where it's welcome, and certainly goes away from where it's in danger.
Right. And as you know, I've always said, look, gold doesn't go up with inflation. That's propaganda. It peaked at 875 in 1980, went down for 19 years. All right. And U.S. national debt went up, inflation went up. It has been going up because of geopolitical. All right. That's when gold goes up. It went from $400 in December 79 to 875 in the last 6 weeks. Why? Because that's when Russia invaded Afghanistan. So it's always geopolitical. And, the EU once were, they've been using Ukraine basically as cannon fodder. They don't care. I was just dealing with Romania and most, why, supposedly the, pro EU guy just won by a hair. All right. The vast majority of people, they understand. They do not want to go to war with Russia. All right. The EU does not care if one Ukrainian is still standing at the end of the day. They had a peace deal. Boris Johnson hopped on the plane, went over there and said, no, you're not allowed to sign. You went from, 300,000 dead to somewhere around 1.1 million. Do they care? They are only looking at Ukraine as the vanguard. And as long as they take a Russian with them, that's great. They actually think, and I've been told this from very reliable sources, they think that Ukraine has been weakening. Russia, they're counting on Poland and Romania to chip in and sacrifice their lives as well. And then they'll be able to walk into Russia. Putin will fall to his knees and say, oh, don't kill me, please, whatever. And Russia is the richest country in the world from natural resources. They have about 75 trillion. And the delusional Europeans, they think if they get a hold of that, it's twice the size of the U.S. national debt. And Europe will rise again from the ashes. Canada, United States will be the vassal, colonies that we should have been from before. They view it as the Roman Empire will rise again. This is the same, BS we heard from Hitler and from Napoleon. It's, in fact, in Paris, I can tell you, I speak to people and they call him Macron the Petit Napoleon.
Let me ask you then, The other thing, if you're looking at general commodity prices, like the hard assets, oil would be obviously one, but copper, et cetera, coming out of Russia. If there's escalation, would you expect those commodity prices to rise? Or the model sort of showing that tendency at this point over time?
It still shows that it doesn't, it looks as though we're heading into what the computers calls basically stagflation.
Mm-hmm.
That inflation's rising, but the economic growth is not. So this is the real problem. Europe, as you know, I mean, I know, Klaus Schwab, and the two of us have been on opposite sides of the table for a long time. We started our World Economic Conference in '85, which you actually came to, I remember.
Yep.
And he started his Davos in '87. And Marcus Vetter did the film on me, the forecaster. And then Schwab went and had a film done on him called The Forum. But the difference between us is that I have proposed reform. Look, we're borrowing year after year with no intention of paying anything off. The central banks are now in trouble. They can't control inflation because if they raise interest rates to stop inflation, the government expenditures and interest go up higher. Keynesian economics was created during the Depression when the U.S. had a balanced budget. So raising and lower interest rates did affect us directly, but that's no longer the case. All these countries, I mean, everybody, they just borrow year after year with zero intention of paying anything back. So the central banks can't really control inflation anymore. So this whole thing is coming apart at the seams. So I've been advocating you can look on YouTube. I did a video. It's called The Solution.
Yes.
How to get out of this. Schwab, with his "you'll own nothing and be happy" stuff, was to make it sound like we're going to default, but we're really doing this for you. We're relieving you of all your debts, But if they default, there goes your pension, everything, right? So, he's just, from what I heard, they lost 20 to 25% of their attendance in January, which is why they just staged this coup to get rid of Schwab. But it's still the same old jalopy, that's just with a new paint job. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's really changed. And your Carney is basically, joined at the hip with the WEF. So I don't think anything's really going to change.
Let's finish off with talking a couple things. One is that you mentioned gold moving, holdings back into the U.S. But again, a broader picture, you're still thinking gold is a foundational sort of thing of protecting yourself going forward. I'm not looking for the short-term trading.
Yeah,
I'm saying.
The difference with gold is that unlike oil or wheat or something like that, it's the same thing traded in London, New York,
mm-hmm.
Tokyo. All right. That's, Bitcoin is similar like that. But Bitcoin has been used, and I hear it from Canadians as well as Europeans. They're doing the same things that the Chinese did. All right. They use it to get the money out.
Mm-hmm.
They buy Bitcoin and they can sell Bitcoin wherever else you want to get it, take your money to. It's been used for that purpose. It's not a store of wealth, anything more than nothing is really a store of wealth in the sense that it's never going to go down. Everything fluctuates. But the big problem with digital currency is when you're going to see the U.S. can't do it. That's why Trump said no and the Fed said no. Not because they're magnanimous. That we have the Fourth Amendment, they would need a search warrant to look at your account. So that's why you have private banks looking at it in the States. Whereas Europe, they don't have that. So they can just, seize all your money, look in your account. That's why they cancel currency routinely. If you had a $500,000 stashed in a savings, in a safe deposit box, and they're canceling the currency, it forces you to come out and say and exchange it. Oh, really? Did you pay taxes on this? Where'd you get this? That's what it's all about.
Well, I suspect there's not going to be any fewer things to talk about. And I was just looking, by the way, I want to let people know that the World Economic Forecast Conference is November 20th, 21st, and 22nd off the top of my head. So the 20th, 21st, 22nd down in Orlando. So that's the kind of thing right now you can plan, do a little advanced planning and go down to. And tickets go on sale on July 29th. So sorry, Marty, I just want to get that plug in there, let people know when the WEC is happening, World Economic Conference is happening. So November 20th, you can check on the site, armstrongeconomics.com, armstrongeconomics.com, because let's face it, there's a ton of stuff. We're coming to a lot of trigger dates, as we just described. Mm-hmm. There's more stuff happening. And as I say, no better person to get a chance to look what he's thinking in terms of capital flows and movement than Martin Armstrong. Marty, thanks for taking the time. We'll do it again soon, I hope.
Well, thanks. It's always good to see you, Mike.